Good morning, world. This is Steve Rao, and sorry for the lighting. I'm about to catch a flight to Washington, and I'm sorry I don't have the good background today, but welcome to Pod TV's World Edition, where we talk about global affairs, innovation, and an ever-changing world, politically, economically. Today, I'm going to try to change my screen real quick. Let me see if I can do this real quick, folks. All right, give me 1 second. There we go. So hopefully you guys can see me, but welcome to World Edition. And today I'm just going to open up the show and hand it over to Mark Lee because I've got to hop on an earlier flight. But my monologue today is based on a historic event taking place right now. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the Indian Prime Minister, has arrived in Washington, D.C. for a week long of events. He actually was in New York. Today he celebrated International Yoga Day. And tomorrow he will be welcome at the White House, which I will be attending in the morning, and addressing the Congress in the afternoon. And then on Friday, I'll be attending an event that he'll be addressing the business leaders of the United States and America and the world at the U.S.-India Strategic Partnership Forum, which is chaired by John T. Chambers, the former CEO and chairman of Cisco Systems. And the bottom line is that I just want to open up with a couple of thoughts before we begin a few minutes of discussion. But I had the honor of meeting, I'm going to paraphrase from an op-ed I just submitted, which I will be sharing with everyone to read. But in 2007, I had the honor of meeting Narendra Modi. And he was the chief minister of the state of Gujarat, where my wife's family is from. And in a matter of minutes, I was amazed. We all were amazed with the passion of this prime minister. He had been actually working to bring a lot of investment into his state. There was a line longer to go see him than any governor of North Carolina. We had an economic development official with us, Paul Butler, who was amazed at that. He had made a lot of investments in solar power. He was fascinated about knowledge economy. He had a lot of vision for his own state, which is a business state. Many people from Gujarat have the last name Patel. They own hotels, motels. They're good business people. And fast forward 16 years later as Prime Minister of India and how far India has come. Today, a couple of things I'll share with you that the ambassador of India shared with us during his remarks in Morrisville and even in Washington for the reception I attended. 1.2 billion people in India have a digital identity. This is having a profound revolution in India in terms of their infrastructure because now the government is actually deploying broadband to 340 million in the rural areas, 700 million through Mukesh Ambani's initiative Geo, and that means that almost the entire population has internet access. Incredibly important for us to look at India's economy. The second takeaway is India in terms of its population, 60% under the age of 26. So this is providing a lot of global talent that the global economy will be able to benefit from, and emerging markets. Many people in the middle class now in India. In terms of the app I just mentioned, think of this. Today in India, within a matter of seconds, they can create a bank account. They can transfer money without fees. Every day in India, they're creating 10 million businesses, and they hire 2 people. That's 20 million people employed a year, 20 million jobs. So there's still a lot of work to do. India's population, 45% doesn't make more than $3 an hour, or $3 a day, actually. So there's still a lot of poverty, and also concerns about Russia, concerns about inclusivity, targeting racial minorities, particularly Christians and Muslims. So hopefully the president and Narendra Modi, Prime Minister, can talk about some of these human rights issues. The third takeaway is startups. 100,000 startups in India, 30 are billion-dollar companies. Many of those new jobs that John Chambers has talked about, the 15 million over the next decade, could be happening in India. So that also affects immigration in terms of, do we want to accelerate immigration to help people create their own companies? That's something that's really, really important for us to understand. I could go on, but the bottom line is that this is an important visit, because the reason I shared with you all these ideas is that, and the final thing is India investing $40 billion in the U.S., creating 425,000 jobs and 1.1 billion in R&D. So India is investing trade and opportunities to partner in defense so that we can rival China, a rising superpower rival to the United States, and also work with them in AI and other areas. There's a lot of opportunities for collaboration, and I think it's really important for us to look at that to see where are the opportunities. There are challenges, which we'll talk about later this week and tomorrow, but I think this is an important state visit. And perhaps is it a move by President Biden to get the Indians motivated to vote? I don't know. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started. But we look forward to a successful state visit and looking forward to, hopefully, I don't think I'll meet him, but I will be at the White House, and then I will be at the address to Congress, and I will be with John Chambers on Friday for the historic address to the business leaders of the United States of America and the world. So, Mark, let's go ahead and begin the show. Sorry I went long. Thank you. I'm here for a few minutes.
No problem. Glad you're going to be here for a few minutes. We actually have a guest from the business community that is actually out of D.C., and I think her organization has some part of her team that is of Indian descent, and she is Sophia Lindberg, who is the founder of Claim Your Potential, which is about women claiming their potential in the business community. And I know that you have a daughter as well as a son, so I'd love for folks to meet Sophia and hear what Sophia is all about. She is actually a student, from my understanding, and all in that space. So she actually started this organization at a very young age, but she was seeing that there was a need for women to get some knowledge about business opportunities and about other things in that space. We do know that there is pay gaps and other things that exist, and a lot of times women are not given the same kind of space that they need in terms of leadership. But it seems like Sophia went ahead and took the bull by the horn, as the old expression goes, and created an organization to address some of those concerns. And like I said, when I looked at her page yesterday, Claim Your Potential, I did see that there were some members of her team that are of Indian and Asian descent and all along those lines. And definitely it is a diverse team that she has put together, and she is based there in the Washington, D.C. area. So who knows, maybe you'll run across her in some of your dealings and everything, Dr. Rao. So Sophia, share a little bit about your organization, Claim Your Potential, the Claim Your Potential podcast, and what you are all about.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me on the show. My name is Sophie Lindberg, and I'm the founder and executive director of Claim Your Potential. And we are on a mission to empower women and girls academically, emotionally, financially, and professionally. So we really focus on this holistic approach to making sure that, when we're empowering women, we're educating women, that we're not just doing it from, one lens. We're doing it from that perspective of, all right, how do we empower the whole person and make sure that, we aren't putting Band-Aid fixes on societal problems. Rather, we are, addressing the whole person. We're addressing, all right, what systems, what processes, what education do you need? And so we really try to take that approach. A little bit about what we do program wise is, thank you for mentioning our podcast. We run a empowerment podcast where we bring on different guests from the community. These are all women who are entrepreneurs, women in the field of academia, women who are singers, writers, scientists, scientists, women who are really involved in pretty much every aspect of the working world, and also, where they are personally in their personal development journey as well. And so we bring these guests on, we talk to them, we ask them questions, we ask them about, what their journey has been. We pick their brain on, advice for our listeners. And really we use that as a educational tool to help provide some of that that 4 pillars of empowerment education, that academic, emotional, financial, and professional. And so we run that part of programming. And then we also have programming that is based on mentorship, because so much of, really growing and developing and becoming, who you're meant to be is around, all right, what are the people that I'm surrounding myself with? Where are they in life? What are they doing? How can I maybe be where they are? How can I grow? I need someone to, really push me and be able to get me there. And so we have something called the Empowered Women's Network, which focuses on mentor and mentee relationships. And so we connect women together to really have that mentor mentee relationship, so that they get to know each other. They get to be, really a supportive space for each other, not just for the mentee, but also for the mentor. So the mentor can really practice, those leadership skills that they're working on, or they can, practice that empathy that they might not be able to use every day, in their positions. Maybe they are solopreneurs, as we call it, people that work people that work with by themselves in their own businesses. And so maybe they're really wanting to mentor someone to bring someone along with them on their professional journey. And so we have that program that just opened up as well. And we're in development of launching more programs. And it's been such a fantastic journey of not just getting this all set up and pushing stuff outwards to the community and gaining clients through this, but also through just bringing people onto the team, being able to practice some of these empowerment techniques, these mentorship techniques with our staff has also been truly monumental. We've made sure that when we bring staff on, that we are exercising, all right, are they, can they bring a different opinion to the conversation? Can they bring a different skill set? Can they bring a different background, so that it's not one voice times 10? It's each individual has their own voice, and that all of our programming, all of our decisions are reflective of different communities, are reflective of different socioeconomic backgrounds, different racial and ethnic backgrounds, trying to make sure that we really include everyone in the conversation. And so, thank you for mentioning our team, because that's something that we really strive to create, is that very inclusive environment, along with making sure that, of course, we have professional development opportunities and everything like that. But, we really try to create that, concept of, all right, let's make sure that everyone is at the table as part of organizational culture, not just team, but also, how we work in the community.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Ms. Lindberg. Which point did you know that you were going to be an entrepreneur, and did you come from a family of entrepreneurs, or is this something that you saw a need for, to have more representation of the women's voice in the entrepreneurial lane? So I was trying to figure out a little bit more about your own journey into this space and the reason that you decided to create this organization.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I definitely don't come from an entrepreneurial family. My dad's an immigrant, came to the US and is a pilot, retired now. And then my mom is in the tech industry, but grew up a welfare child. So I saw both of my parents, start off pretty much at the bottom when, they started in the US, and then really worked their way up. And so I think that's more where the spirit came from, not so much, starting your own business, but just starting over altogether. And that was something that was, very prevalent, growing up. And so I think that's where really a lot of it stems from. And I'm an only child. And so, with both of my parents having a very, all right, you have to go out and get it. You have to, do a little bit more with your life. You've got to, I know that you're intelligent, that you're going to be successful. I want to see what you can do. And so that was really, pushing me to, like, all right, I got to do what, is going to make them proud. I have to, go out and do something that's big. And so I got involved in the nonprofit industry, and that's what my level of education is. I'm a nonprofit management student, and also where my professional experience has been in. And so I always knew that, the nonprofit sector was for me, that's what I wanted to do. And, when you're involved in the sector, it's really easy to fall into that, that pattern of, all right, I want to, you know, help as many people as possible, and I, want to save the world and all of that. And while it's great, it's not quite realistic. And so you have to get a little bit more focused on your target demographic. All right, who do I want to help? Who am I most passionate about serving? And I started Claim Your Potential at one of the most difficult times in my life. And I didn't even mean to start it as a women's empowerment organization. I meant to just start it as a general empowerment organization. And then over time, I realized that a lot of the guests I was bringing on, a lot of our conversations were really geared towards women. And so as I expanded from just a podcast to a actual not-for-profit organization, I realized, all right, I have to have a target demographic. Who do I think that I can best serve? And so we decided on, all right, I think that women and girls 13 plus is where I meant to be in the nonprofit space, where I think that I can do the most good, where I think that I have the, really the drive to keep me going there, where I have the ideas, where I have, the experiences from, bad things that have happened, and being able to go, all right, I can now use those to make sure if someone has gone through that they're not going through it alone, that they're equipped with the skills, with the resources to get through that. So that's really why I ended up in this space, why I started Claim Your Potential, and why I chose women and girls specifically.
No, along those same lines, and I'm going to bring in some of the other panelists as well. And Dr. Rao may have a question for you as
Sophie,
well.
I want to thank you for being here. I've got to leave early to catch a flight. I'm going to try to get an earlier flight, but I want to thank you for being with us. And I'm sorry, I'm managing a lot of receptions, but we'd love your perspective I'm going to be going back on Friday live from Washington to address everyone about what I learned from Modi's congressional address. But I think there's a lot of opportunities for you to offer your services in India to this growing, population. And so, Mark, I'm sorry I had to leave early. The only other game-changing news is Hunter Biden accepting a plea deal. So that's will not affect the presidential race. And in North Carolina, Tim Moore, the speaker, in a scandal, being sued for alienation of affections by having an affair, which he's admitted to the wife of Scott Lassiter, an Apex councilman. So will this affect the speaker's ability to stay in office? Will he be asked to resign? And will it be meaning that I have to take my pictures down off of my website with him? I've had a working relationship with him, but maybe it'll blow over. But it's I don't know if you heard about it, Mark, but it's just been kind of an unexpected twist in the
political scene, and I hadn't been following that particular story and everything. Really quickly before I bring in the
thank you, Sophie. I'll be in touch. Mark, I'll see you on Friday. I'm sorry I had to leave early.
No problem. And before I bring in the other panelists and everything, how real do you feel the glass ceiling is as a young lady? I'm guessing that you're somewhere in that 18 to 25 set yourself based on your founding of this organization, and also still in the school and everything. So how real do you feel the glass ceiling is?
I think that's a great question. And really, the glass ceiling to me, it's always been there. But I think that it gets broken in small increments, right? It gets broken, maybe a few times, and then it gets built back. And that's kind of how I view it is we break through it, and then someone's like, let me put the glass ceiling back in. And then we have to break it again. So I definitely think it's real. I think it's there, but I think the likelihood, the ease of breaking it is getting just a little bit easier. And there's a lot more women out there that are really starting to go, you know what, this isn't acceptable. Let's break this thing together.
Yeah, no doubt about that and everything. I'm going to bring in, like I said, Lee's here, as is Jatofi, and also Sasha Starr. So don't know if y'all have any questions for Sophia based on the conversation in her organization, Claim Your Potential, and all in that way. But anybody, the guys with Lee.
No, good morning. Welcome to podcast, Sophia. I just want to piggyback something that Steve said before he left. Just a question I'm throwing out there. Steve mentioned something about somebody having an affair and maybe having to step down. In our society today, who's to say affairs are bad?
Before we go down that road, let's stay on the positive side of things and think about other ways. Like Sophia, with your organization, what other industries do you think that we can work with to help break that glass ceiling, for example? For like for me, I deal in the tech industry and the gaming industry, and I know that there is definitely that ceiling that needs to be broken through because
Mhm.
of the amount of women that are in programming and so on and so forth. So in your view, how can we work in other industries to really break through and give that women that fair share?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And really, the answer is I think every industry. You mentioned, the STEM industry, tech industry. A lot of that still has that glass ceiling. I also think about, the business industry as well, especially when it comes to executive leadership. And you look at, the number of women on corporate executive boards compared to the number of men, and then you look at, performance wise, that when you include women in the conversation, when you include women on boards, there's actually a improvement in share value. So there's value there of adding women to the conversation, and it's just that general level of, all right, how do we make sure that we're getting women involved, we're getting women in positions of power. There was a report that came out where it was for every 100 men that are promoted within the same positions, only 87 women are promoted. And so it's really about making sure, all right, how do we make sure that we are getting those voices into conversation, that women are at managerial levels, that they can be in positions of power, that they are CEOs of companies, that they are the heads of departments, that they really have that voice there. Now, I'm not saying only give women those positions, but what I am saying is they should be in those positions if they're qualified to be in those positions, and a lot of the time that doesn't happen. And a lot of it really does come down to not just societal norms, but also the skills that we're equipping women with. We have to make sure that we're equipping women with the skills that they need to be in those roles, to go out and get those jobs, to be financially independent and secure and happy, to make sure that they have that kick butt resume, that they've done the mock interviews, that they've really prepared and know that they're confident in what they're doing and can really sell themselves, build their own elevator pitch, so to speak. And I think that's also where a lot of it is giving them those skill sets so that they can go out and get it themselves as well.
I was in a
Now,
room yesterday. It was
I,
actually a relationship type room, but it was a room about the different styles of communication. And it was talking about the ways that women communicate differently than men do. And I just wondered, do you find that, and does that play a part in your mentorship conversation as well? Because, like I said, it was a room, I think it was a clubhouse room, but they were definitely
oh,
talking about the
and
different styles of communication. And I was wondering, does that play a part in the way that you train folks and the way that you try to get them to go for jobs? Because I don't know that they always are the same styles of leadership. Sometimes men are accepted for doing things that women are not always accepted in that space. But I was wondering your thoughts about that and how you deal with that as a mentor.
Mhm.
actually, and to tie on to that, Sophie,
Yeah.
because interestingly enough, read study about how women are better in that leadership position because, matter of fact, I just pulled it up again. It said the 32 companies that have women as CEOs have significantly outperformed companies run by men. Does that tie into Mark, what he's talking about the communication?
Yeah, absolutely. Really, when I speak with women, when we mentor women, when I talk to staff, a lot of our communication level is at that you're my equal intellectually, so I'm going to treat you like my equal intellectually. And I think that's where a lot of that communication may differ. I think that you know. I'm not saying every man does this, but I'm saying it's more prevalent with male communication styles is when they are in positions of power. There tends to be a lot of imbalance between them in power and then the people that they lead. Again, not saying that everyone does this, but it's common for this to happen. And so a lot of the time, people that work under those those male managers, it's hard to come to your boss and say, hey, here's what's going on with me at home, I need some time off. Or, hey, I had this idea about this project we're working on, I'd love to take the lead on this. let me know if I can do this, things like that. And I think that it's not really, they might be able to do that, but it's not as encouraged. Whereas women, we know what it's like to not be given every opportunity. And so a lot of the time, for example, when I'm, leading a project, I will ask my staff, I'll say, hey, does anyone else actually want to work with me on this and take the lead? And I'll sit back, you can answer, I can answer your questions, you can ask the questions, and I'm more than happy to guide you there. And so I think that's a very big part of how women manage and lead, is making sure that, all right, how do I get every single person on my team involved and feeling like they are in some sort of leadership role, even if it's not a formal leadership role, but it might just be, they're leading a certain part of a project or something like that. And so I think that's part of it. And then the other part is that level of empathy. When, women are managers, when women are directors, we are very empathetic, and we are very and we approach our work with empathy. And so when we interact not just externally with clients and the community, women tend to, with their staff, tend to be very, all right, I want to make sure that I'm prioritizing work, but at the same time I'm prioritizing your well-being, your health, because you can't get this done if you're overwhelmed at home or if there's something else going on. So it's, how can I help you alleviate some of that stress so that you can do your work better? And I think that's a really big part of how women manage. It's how I manage. It's how I've been managed before, with such a strong level of empathy and just talking and getting to know each other, and really having that open dialogue, especially when, you are managing other women. It's a very powerful and wonderful moment of being able to be in those positions where you can say, all right, I know that if I was, in her position, at her age range, I would have wanted my manager to give me something like this project or to talk to me like this. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. And so you can really approach it from, that level of just general understanding, I think would be the main communication difference, is we're a lot more empathetic, and we put a little bit more we put more emphasis on how are you, not just out of work, but how is the whole of yourself doing. And I think there's a lot of power in doing that to really ensure that productivity as well.
Now, in that, I was just going to say quick to tie on to what you were talking about there, in terms of not only the communication and dealing and having that empathy, having somebody in that CEO position, to even having somebody below. That ties into the question, I guess, that could go across all spectrums and all cultures. And we'll just focus it mainly on the female perspective, because how much do you feel that representation matters in that space? How much do you feel that, when, for example, take the Marvel movies, for example, we'll do this way out in the ethos, in that, I guess, arena, but how they've changed genders of particular characters to give representation to not only women in that area, because, I mean, what do you feel that not only in that arena and the business arena that young women see, does it matter seeing that representation?
Oh my goodness, it absolutely matters. I think that, a lot of the time when I have these conversations, there's talks on, all right, well, representation, doesn't really do anything for, women's empowerment. And I think I've heard both ends of the stick, but for me, it really is just incredible for not just my own motivation, but the way that I approach my work, being able to have women that I can, touch on almost, where it's like, hey, look at this success story. You can do that. That is possible. We just launched something called Spotlight a Woman in Your Community, and it's around making sure that we are lifting women up that are making a difference in their own communities, that we're spotlighting them on social media, on our newsletter, on our website, so that another woman can look at that and go, oh, she's in this industry. That's my industry. Oh, she owns her own company. Oh, I want to do that. I want to be like her. How do I do that? oh, maybe I can get in contact with her. And then just being able to really put a face to, your own vision, I think makes it a lot easier to go after what you want, to take the extra step, to, try to break through those glass ceilings. When you see someone else that's done it and they've done it successfully, being able to have that as a role model, I think makes just life in general a lot easier for you, because you can go, all right, I know it's possible. So I don't feel like every, setback is trying to push me away from my goal. Every setback instead is just preparing me for that role. It's preparing me to be the best person I can possibly be at that role. And so when you have that representation, it really changes your mindset from that half full versus half empty, approach, that mindset. So absolutely, the more representation, the better, especially when it comes to, women of color, making sure that, there's representation there. I think, over looking back on Marvel, I mean, they've had, women come on. But I think having more women of color would also make it a whole lot more inclusive, and really making sure that, again, we're having that role model. So it's not just, all right, this white woman did it. It's, no, this woman from my racial background did it, and she grew up maybe the same way I did. And you know what? I know that I can do this because now I know that she did it. So there's no barrier for me. I can make it happen. So I think that's something really important to keep in mind there as well.
Hey, Sophia, along those same lines, how important do you think it is for both genders to have a positive role model that is a woman? Because I know that in my own life, one of my main mentors, and Jacoby knows this, as do other people that are familiar with this network, is my mom, who is retired and was a leader in the business and the nonprofit community, but is still somewhat in the consultant realm in that space and everything. But definitely she was one of my main mentors. Definitely dad is as well, but mom is somebody that I talk to regularly. So how important, and I know even if you talk to people like you personally, where people have done interviews with Obama and even some of the other world leaders, and they have talked about their connection to their mom and other female leaders in their life. So how important do you think that is to be a well-rounded leader?
Oh my goodness, it is so important. We talk a lot about, women having women to look up to, but I think it's so important that men have women to look up to. I think, in this day and age, it's important to surround yourself with people that have different perspectives than you, people that have different life experiences. And so, especially when, men reach out to women in their lives and, have that mentor-mentee relationship, it, is crucial to really developing, who you are as a man, to, who you are in this world, who you are at work, who you are at home. Being able to have that other perspective of, hey, this is what it's like to be a woman. This is what I did. This is what I did career-wise. And I think it really fosters that level of, mutual respect there as well. Even if you don't think it's happening and you don't think it's active, it's, telling your mind that this is my equal, and I should treat them as an equal. And so when you look at, the difference between men that had, a positive female role model growing up versus men that didn't, you can see such a different level of, respect and understanding and inclusivity. As well as, when you're in positions of power, being able to, not just go to, the guy next door and asking them questions, being able to go, hey, I know that, Susan from, let's say, this office would also be really great at answering this question. So I'm going to go to her and ask her because I know that she can answer the question just as well as, let's say, Mark next door to me can. So maybe I'll ask them both. So I have diverse perspectives.
But that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So I think
Along
it's
those-
really key.
Yeah, along those same lines, and just really quickly, and I know Sasha may have some questions, and definitely Lee as well, but we oftentimes hear the conversation around misogyny and that being a problem. We kind of alluded to it, but how much of a problem do you think that is in society? And along those same lines, how important, because I know that one of our founders here on the network, who is a woman as well, that being Kim Calhoun, oftentimes talks about reclaiming words that may have a negative connotation and all in that space. There's a certain word that is associated with dogs that she talks about reclaiming and all in that space. How important do you think it is to reclaim words that may have a negative connotation, and how prevalent do you think misogyny is in our today's society?
Yeah, so going to your first question on reclaiming words, I think there's a lot of communities that have done this as a way to, really reclaim the words, reclaim the power, say, this is my word. I'm not going to let you have or put this negative connotation to it. I'm going to say it's this. And I think, it is like all those communities where it's okay if I say it, not so much okay if someone else says it, where it's really reclaiming that power for myself. And so when I think about the word that you're talking about, and my level of comfortability with it, I am, very much like, don't say it to me, but I will happily call myself that if, it warrants it. And I think that's kind of where I am in that headspace. Do I think it's a nice word? Definitely not. Would I ever want to be called that? Definitely not. But I think that really understanding what the word is used for and, the connotation with it, I think is really how we can reclaim it. A lot of the time when that word is used, it's when women speak up and say something. And so I think, really, addressing that is really important to reclaiming that word, going, all right, you're calling me this because why? Oh, because I said something, because I disagreed with your opinion, because what? And so I think that's where a lot of that word has been used, is in those spaces. And so I think, to me, if I was called that, in the back of my mind, I'd go, that's a little mean. But at the same time, my mindset would be, well, I guess you're threatened because rather than having a conversation with me and talking to me like a normal human being, you're now calling me a word. I would never do that to anyone else. So that's, my headspace on that. In terms of misogyny, I think it's something that women have always dealt with, and it takes different forms, in different eras of society. Right before, it was, all right, we just want to be able to vote, was where it took place, and now it's really evolved into almost this hidden, um really this hidden thing that isn't really that hidden. It's very easy to ignore if you don't have to deal with it on a regular basis. It wasn't, like before, where you could clearly see, okay, women can't vote, women can't own their own credit card, women can't do this, women can't do that. But now it's a lot of those societal norms, societal pressures that, some people might not be able to see, but we feel it every day. We feel it in rooms that are filled with men. And it can a lot of the time be a very overwhelming feeling. It can feel very scary sometimes. And I know in my bio, I mentioned that I'm a survivor of sexual assault and emotional abuse. And so a lot of that was rooted in not being respected as a woman. Someone saying, I don't care. I'm not going to treat you like a human being because I don't think you're a human being. So I'm going to do X, Y, and Z to you. And so that's, where I see it. I see it in, conversations, even if people don't think that it's what they're saying. I've heard, some things that pretty much came off to me as, oh, you can't do that because you're a woman. Or, oh, you don't want to be married. Oh, you don't want kids. Oh, okay. That's interesting. And so I've had a lot of those conversations. And so I think, really being aware of it and speaking to women in your life makes that a lot easier for us as a community to really help overcome. Do I think it's ever going to go away completely? No. But do I think that we can, try to educate ourselves, talk to the women in our life, say, hey, I want to know a little bit more about what your experience has been. How has it been being a woman in business? How has it been being a woman in your community? Really hearing those stories. And when you hear those stories, it's a lot easier to go, oh, I had no idea that women were dealing with this. okay, now I need to be a little bit more cognizant of some of the things I might say, or now I need to be a little bit more aware that this is still going on. And I can't think that it's, completely gone just because, women can vote and we can own a credit card and buy property, but at least in this country. But I think that's really a lot of what it comes down to is being open to hearing, our side of things and where we've been.
Hey, Sophia, along those same lines, there are some women that I know that are, I'm going to actually go back to a TV series and all in that space, kind of going back into the Marvel and the literary world and the movie world. But there is a movie out there called Handmaid's Tales. And I know some women that are afraid that we could be heading into that kind of space if we are not careful and all in that kind of way, because there is definitely some very draconian ways that the women are treated in that particular movie. And I have definitely had some conversation with some women that are afraid that we could be heading in that direction. So as a young woman, is that a fear of yours? And do you think that there is any reality to that movie depiction?
Very familiar with the show you're talking about. And I'm kind of laughing about it now because I haven't seen it in years, but I think that to that extent, that's something that I'm not sure about. I don't think that, 100% of everything in there would happen, or at least I would hope that, us as, I would hope good human beings wouldn't do that. But I do think there are some current policies and practices that are being carried out that, really reflect some of the policies and some of the sentiments in that show. I won't get into it too much, but there's a lot of policies, especially politically, in terms of laws and things like that have come out over the past few years relating to, control over women's bodies. And so I think that that's a very big part of that show is, the loss of autonomy in women's decisions, right? They are, a handmaid, they are assigned, that role. They have that one job of producing children for essentially people that have kidnapped them and trapped them. And so there's a lot of loss of autonomy. And I think that's something that women are really feeling right now is, for a while we felt like, okay, society's making progress. We're getting, all of this more representation. I feel like the laws are on my side now. Like there's, I feel protected. And I think especially over the past few years, there's been a lot of pushes away from that. And it makes a lot of us very scared and very unsure of, what policy is going to come next. That really pushes us, over that line of, all right, this is no longer a, an issue of, okay, maybe there's glass ceilings for us to break and we don't have equal pay and we don't have this. And then it turns into, okay, we don't have that. And now we also don't have control over anything we can do. Okay. I don't think we're there yet, but it's looking as though it is going that way if there's not an immediate change. And so something that I feel a lot of us women feel, a lot of my community feels, and we've talked about this, is we are very afraid. And I think it's, worth mentioning that I don't ever want to be afraid. I shouldn't have to feel afraid. Women in my community shouldn't have to feel afraid. And the fact that we're feeling this way, living in such a developed nation is very scary. And it's very hard to grasp.
In staying on that same line, I guess my question would be to you, because thinking about having the same fears, dealing with the Handmaid's Tale and all the different policies and so on and so forth, that always brings up in my mind that famous quote: "First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist." That whole quote where basically we are so divided in our own battles, even though we're battling the same thing. Well, our battles are very similar.
Yeah.
Like with women's right to vote, same thing with the African American right to vote, the women to be able to control their bodies and so on and so forth. So my question is, in your opinion, how can we all as minority groups
Mm-hmm.
work together more so than separately
Mm-hmm.
and trying to battle that oncoming onslaught of these policies that are really, taking away, whitewashing history, basically?
Yeah. And I think that, really the first step to getting there is just getting into a room together and saying, all right, we have almost the same goals. We want to be represented, we want to be respected, and we want, we want to feel safe, right? We want to feel like our lives matter, right? And so I think that getting those minority groups into a room together and saying, all right, this is the common theme to everything that we're pushing for, whether it's, policy or it's, social norms. This is everything that we're pushing for. So how can we, reframe our messaging, and rather than, okay, I want this for my group, and then say, actually, no, I want this for everyone, for the greater part of my group, right? Everyone should feel protected. Doesn't matter what your background is. Everyone should have that feeling. Everyone should feel respected. Doesn't matter where you came from, doesn't matter where you are in this life, doesn't matter anything. You should feel respected, protected. You should feel that your voice matters, that you are safe, that you can grow professionally, financially, and in every way. And so I think being able to come together, in one space and maybe do more of that joint advocacy of, all right, I am part of this group. And then, you have someone who's part of a different, sub-minority group and so forth, but you all come together and say, all right, the 10 of us, maybe we are all advocating that you know, you pass this or you do this or that we do this as a society, because it doesn't just benefit me, it benefits the person to my left and it benefits the person to my right. And I think that when you have that, representation across the board and you approach it with a more, a lens of intersectionality, that's when you get progress done. You look at some of the most successful social movements in American history, what happened? People from across the board said, this is enough. I'm done with this. We're going to help these people. Even if it's not my group, I don't care, because what happens to them affects me. Right. And so I think when you look at that, those were successes because other people were involved, because other people said, all right, I see what would happen if this doesn't go well for them. Then that means that this could impact me, and they're human beings. I'm a human being. I would want to feel, protected, respected. So therefore they should. Right. And I think really taking that approach.
That makes a lot of sense. Hey, Sophia, along those same lines and everything, and it is the World Edition and all in that space, there are countries around the world that don't necessarily have the same kind of thought pattern when it comes to women's rights and all in that kind of way. And definitely thinking about some of the ones in the Middle East. I know that Sasha, who is here, has talked about some of the abuse that has gone on with the Ukrainian women and all in that space. And I was actually just reading an article about Honduras, where at least 41 women were killed in a Honduran prison riot. So how important, as a woman leader here in the United States, do you feel it is to be part of the global communication and the global women's rights movement if there are different policies that are part of their culture that may not necessarily resonate with Western culture and all along those lines? Because there are sometimes that there are cultural differences around the ways that people are treated, even though we want people to always be treated fairly, whether they are here or in India or in Timbuktu or wherever they are. But how much of that is and in points to you, and how much do you get involved in those global communications with your organization?
Right. I think that, when you think about, the global women's movement, and especially, being in the US, is what that looks like here. Being an advocate is very different than what it looks like on an international scale. And so for any, women listening to this who are in that space, realizing that and understanding that is the first part of being in that space, saying that, all right, in the US, I might be able to, to advocate this one way, because mindset wise, people are a lot more similar to maybe how I think, to, the general population might feel, more how I feel about women and our rights, right? So it's a lot easier to advocate in this country, in this space, whether it's, advocating at a outreach level or it's advocating at a policy level. It's a lot easier to make that happen here, from if you live here, if you understand the culture here and everything like that. And so realizing that that's going to be a barrier when you start putting it into the international lens, because you can't know the culture and understand the culture of every single country that you're trying to advocate in. You can't influence, every single policy that is in other countries. And so when you look at advocating for women from an international global lens, rather than doing it from all right, let's focus on, specific policies that are bad, or, specific countries that are bad. I think it's a lot more beneficial when you focus on, all right, here's our key message. We want women to feel these things. Now, what does that look like in your country? What does that look like in your policy? Because and this happens a lot, when other countries tell other countries what to do, what happens? Nothing happens. And so when we do it from a lens of, this is your choice, right? You get to choose the policies, you get to choose how this gets enacted in your own nation. So long as you ask yourself, these questions: does it make women feel safe? Does it make women feel protected? Does it make women feel respected? Does it make women this, right? Asking those questions. And so a lot of the most successful, international advocates for women do it from that lens. They don't say, all right, I think that what's going on specifically here, this law, this policy is awful. Let's put all of our attention on, focusing on that. They might mention it here and there as a statistic or as a way to say, hey, that's probably not so great that you're doing that. But for the most part, they say women everywhere should feel these things, and let's, join together to make them feel that. And so I think that, internationally, something that Claim Your Potential is trying to do is, we're based in the US, but we have, plans for expansion up into Canada and then possibly overseas as well. And so what that looks like, long term, very well may be, all right, how do we advocate from that international lens? But of course, when we talk about women's rights and we talk about women, having that voice, a lot of our messaging is from the perspective of, I don't care, where you come from, what your background is. Our message stays the same of, women should feel these things. Let's make that happen. And it might look different in different spaces.
That makes a lot of sense. Sasha, I don't know, she said she might be coming to Canada. I know your wife is a leader in that area as well. So I don't know if you had any questions or thoughts about what Sophia is talking about, because I know your wife, that is a chess leader and all in that space. So maybe they're coming toward Canada and other parts of the world. But I don't know if you had any questions or if Lee had any follow-up questions.
Yes, Sophia, it was my pleasure to listen to you. You're very eloquent, and it's just real pleasure to listen to you. I have actually two questions, but let me start with the first one. Right now, I have a chess program on POD TV, and I just read today that site chess.com became one of the top 100 sites in the United States. And actually, I wouldn't be surprised that in the world as well, because chess community is international in scope, and there are many countries in Europe, Asia, Latin America where people play chess, and online right now. And chess.com, it's mostly online resource. Now, the question that I can't answer myself, but maybe you will. It's well known that women are inferior to men in chess. It's a fact. You cannot deny it. It's only one woman in top 100 men worldwide in that category. Okay. Now, the chess, that something corresponds to a logic, recognition of patterns, and maybe other qualities that needed in the management skills in the on the top level of the corporations required, and so on. So women inherently are inferior to men when it comes to logical thinking, the management, and so on. So, in spite of all the progress that women made lately, and not just women, it's also minorities, it's also LGBTQ community, and all this stuff. But objectively, they are inferior. So if you recognize that and women knows that, maybe they had to be more adjustable to their role in the community, especially in the leadership positions. That's my question.
I think that's a very interesting question. What I would like to ask back at you is, you talked about specifically women in chess and how there's only one, you know, woman who's a chess champion,
Who is
right?
in top 100? So 99 top men are
Okay.
men and one is woman.
Right. I think something to consider here, though, is how many women are being encouraged to get into, the chess community. How many women are, at these championships? How many women are being encouraged by their mentors to pursue chess? How many women, are involved in that headspace? And I think that that's very hard when we think about, statistics, and it's very common for, a conversation like this to come up. But what's really important to think about is, what is the bigger picture, right? How many women are we talking about here that are being involved, right? And if statistically they're not the same, if there's not as many women as men who are participating in chess championships in these chess matches, then there isn't a fair comparison here. And that's something to really keep in mind. And you mentioned something about women adjusting to their roles in the community, and I would love to hear what you mean by their roles in the community.
Okay, first of all, when you're asking how many women were involved in chess playing, so there's only 1 out of 100 top players is female, but the same question could apply how many women were encouraged to become, for example, composers of classical music or painters, artists, or so on, and you will see that all these areas, literature, it's all dominated by men. So you can say that, well, it wouldn't be so if more women would be encouraged to participate. But encouragement is something that naturally happens. Nobody will, in his right mind, to spend all your time, unless it's your case is separate and specific. But no people would spend their time to encourage just women to participate, for example, in chess, ignoring men who are already advanced so much, and it's much more productive to work with the best men players, for example, than women. Same applies to music, same applies to poetry, same applies to almost everything. And unfortunately, it's a fact. You will not get a lot of mileage by denying facts. But actually, you will get much farther ahead by agreeing to the facts and find a niche in this world, which for the next 2,500 years will be the same because of the biological differences between women and men. So you have to sort of especially if you're fighting for the top leadership positions, and for the same top leadership positions fight minorities and the LGBTQ communities or so on. So it will be eventually fight between one minority and against another minority and against third minority. My second question actually was another one. For first time in January of next year, in tennis tournament, Australian Open, there will be transgenders allowed to play in a women's draw. What's your view? What's your view on that?
Just a quick thing, just to point out, Sophia, you are correct. There's only in a study in 2019, there were only 10% of women actually played chess, and the year before, I think it was 8%. So therefore, yeah, the participation in chess, you are spot on with what you're saying.
Thank you. And to, address the first part of what you said, Sasha, I think that, you know, when you're thinking about representation, when we're talking about encouragement, what we're talking about is, all right, how do we make sure that women are included at the table? I mean, you look at one of the most successful authors of all time, Emily Dickinson, was ridiculed, absolutely ridiculed for being a novelist in her time, right? Plenty of men were novelists. Were they ridiculed? No, she was ridiculed, right? And so when you think about women in all these different spaces, and that's something that hasn't really gone away, is women are still carrying this burden of, oh, it's not normal for me to pursue logical pursuits because there are, societal norms that are telling me that I can't. For example, this conversation, women listening to this are now probably reinforcing the idea in themselves that, oh, I can't pursue logic based activities. Oh, I can't pursue, logic based careers. Then what do you expect women to do? Right? They're going to stay where they are in life. They're not going to empower themselves. They're not going to be a part of these conversations if that's the pushback they receive when they are part of those conversations. And I think it's very important to, for me as a woman to tell other people listening to this that what was just said is not true. Women and men are intelligent creatures. We're both intelligent creatures. We
Some
both have, yes, some men, some women. Everyone has a bit of intelligence in them. Some people, might be more skilled at music composition than others. Some people might be more skilled at engineering than others, regardless of their gender, right? You know, it's about intelligence level. It's about passion. It's about, a lot of other things other than what their gender is. And so when we think about representation and we talk about representation, this is part of the problem because we're saying that women can't be in these roles because when they are in these roles, they're not as successful. Why are they not as successful? It's not because they aren't good at what they do. It's because they might have not had the same access to opportunities. They might have not had the same access to a mentor that could have helped push them further.
Yeah.
Hey, Sophia, along those same lines, and I'm gonna let the conversation go a little bit longer than usual and everything, but how important do you think it is? We talked about this earlier when we talked about representation. There are a number of universities. Of course, there is the conversation around whether HBCUs are needed in the 21st century. There are also women's colleges. I know that there are at least a couple here in North Carolina where me and Jatovi are based at, and all along those lines. So how important do you think it is for us still to have colleges that are geared toward one gender or another in the 21st century? I know that some of those colleges have gone co-ed, but some of them have stayed women-oriented universities. So how important do you think it is for us to have that in the 21st century?
Yeah, and I think, integration always great for universities, right? Because you get that, that level of, difference in perspective, difference, of backgrounds. But I also think that, when you look at, as you said, HBCUs, or you look at, historically, women universities, I think there's also a lot of power too, in those spaces, right? Because it provides a space for those that want to really explore who they are within their own community. I think it offers a lot of opportunity for that, as well as, how I am, how I was raised growing up. My background is very different than another woman's background. And so even if, you aren't in an institution that is, predominantly, people from different genders, different races, different countries, different everything, different socioeconomic backgrounds, everything like that. But even being in those spaces where it's, predominantly one group, you're still going to get, some of those diversities there, whether it's, socioeconomic background, ethnic background, just general upbringing is very different between people. And so I think that, there's a lot of women that I know that enjoy those spaces because they get to be around people that, might have had the same disadvantages as them, and they understand, some of that. They have, that level of empathy of, I understand that I'm a woman, you're a woman, we can bond on that level. And I might believe something different than you religiously, politically, I might have been raised different, but we can still have that common ground of, we're both women. We can get on the same page about that at least. And so I think that that really fosters that level of understanding there. And I think that, I'm excited that, we're really trying to preserve a lot of these institutions. And I think we should be for that very reason.
Yeah.
Just
really
to
quick.
point out, I did find this. I did ask the question just because, just to point out, there are studies out there that say women are more logical than men.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I've heard those studies.
Uh-oh, it sounds like Mark froze.
Oh, no.
Well, on a fun question, because this is an interesting one to stay on more of a lighter note and get back to the movie and entertainment industry. One of the most interesting, and since you're speaking with, nothing but men on this panel, help us understand, because one of the interesting things that I find
weird
is that the lack of understanding of men understanding how women can control, I guess, their own sexuality, and that's dealing with, like your artists out there. Like Rihanna did the halftime show, and I thought she did a phenomenal job because she empowered her own sexuality and showed true power, being who she was, even being pregnant at the time of that. So, how, as a man, or in the way our brains are wired, how can you help us understand the difference between a woman controlling her sexuality in these artists that are out there and a woman who's exploiting her sexuality and so on and so forth? How is that? Where's that difference, and how can we better ourselves?
Right. And I think that, something important to, to think about there is, what do we mean by exploiting, their sexuality? I think that, for different people, how they express themselves in that, in that space looks very different. And so what might be me expressing my sexuality, in a comfortable way might not be, comfortable for someone else, for another woman. Another woman might be like, oh, that might be a little bit too much, oh, you're exploiting that. Whereas to me, it might be, I'm just, my normal self. I'm just, this feels comfortable to me. This feels, what's natural to me. And so I think that, really understanding, it's really based around that mutual level of respect, right? I think when men express their sexuality, I don't think I've ever heard, myself as a woman, anyone else, anyone in my community, anyone I've ever spoken to say, oh, he's exploiting his sexuality, or, oh, he's so sexual, things like that. Oh, he's showing too much of his body, blah, 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 blah. I don't think I've ever heard that. And so I think that just extending that same courtesy to women, in that sense of saying, she's doing what's comfortable for her. That's okay. Not my business. As long as she's safe, as long as she, feels respect for herself, then doesn't matter what she's doing. Not my business. It's not my body. It's, it's none of my concern there. And so, thank you for your question.
Sophie, I just want to follow up on what Toby was saying. In terms of the workplace, there seem to be no guidelines in terms of women sexualizing themselves or not, in terms of business dress. Men, business dress historically is a suit and a tie. Women, I don't think there are any guidelines. Am I wrong?
Yes. So in a lot of organizations, women are required to wear stockings. In a lot of organizations, women are required to wear skirts that go past their knee. This also happens in public education systems at schools. Women still have dress codes, so women are not allowed to show their shoulders. Women are not allowed to wear V-necks at some schools. Women are not allowed to wear jeans at some schools. Women are not allowed to wear leggings at some schools. So there's actually still a pretty heavy policing, so to speak, of women's dress codes. Whether it's in the office, or it's in the education system, or it's in, just society in general. I've been catcalled a few times for wearing shorts, right? People wear shorts all the time. It's happened to me a couple of times where I've been catcalled for wearing shorts. So there's still a very heavy idea of what women should be wearing. And so, especially in organizations, a lot of those older corporate organizations definitely still have those dress codes on stockings. There was a couple HR policies that I was looking at because I'm in the process of drafting them for my own organization. And there are plenty of investment banking organizations that still require women to wear stockings.
And I guess on that same vein, I guess we'll still go down that same line because this is one of those things that I find very interesting because we do a lot of policing of women, but really the policing of women seems to be where that, oh, don't show this or don't show that because it's going to make this male feel uncomfortable or a particular way.
Mm-hmm.
So how can we, in a sense, reverse that? Because, for example, the catcalling, the old mantra, she brought it on herself because of what she wore. When we try and teach women all this stuff, but never really turn around and say, we really need to teach men how to treat women. So how can we shift that around where we're policing women less and allowing them more freedoms to be and express themselves in any way they want to, and really make men understand we have to allow the women to be that same freedom that we have. Because
Toby, we definitely need to hold men accountable 100%.
No, and along those same lines, I'd love to hear Sophia's thoughts about this, and then we'll wrap up in another 5 minutes or so and all in that space. But there are a number of organizations, I know I've been part of organizations that have you sign those sex harassment policies and anti-sex harassment policies, but I don't know how much they are just lip services, people writing down their names and not actually enforced. So I was wondering your thoughts about this, because I know that there are organizations I've been part of that you are literally signing them, it seems like annually, but I don't know that they are always enforced, or they are enforced kind of in a willy-nilly kind of fashion. So they might be enforced in one moment and then not enforced in another moment, depending on the inner office politics that are going on. I just put it bluntly that way, because sometimes somebody may be targeted and somebody may be doing something similar but not get the same results, because they're not always uniform in the way that they are handled. And I was just wondering your thoughts about that, and if there are ways that we can make sure that they are enforced and enforced fairly.
Yeah. And to go to Jatovi's question really quickly, I think a lot of it starts on, young boys, right? I think there's that phrase, boys will be boys. And it's very detrimental to, what their long-term respect looks like. Right. It's when, a boy acts out in class, or maybe he hits a girl in the sandbox or something like that. And, rather than there being a punishment or, something like, oh, don't hit her, not good. It's a lot of it is, oh, well, he's a boy. He's just getting some anger out. He's just getting some aggression out. Boys will be boys. And so when young men, when they grow up and they've heard that from a very young age, and that's been, what the mindset has been at home, or it, where they went to school or anything like that, how can they be accountable, right? If their entire life they've been told it's okay to act this way, because you're a boy, boys will be boys, it's okay. And so a lot of the time when you think about some of those perpetrators of sexual harassment, sexual assault, a lot of them grew up with that mentality, and never being told that it wasn't okay, that, boys aren't just boys, that you have to respect other people the same way that, we respect each other. And I think that's part of it. And I think the other part, comes down to when it comes to those sexual harassment policies. I mean, I know I've signed many of them. It's part of onboarding when you go into a new organization. I have to watch like 2-hour trainings almost every year on them. And, a lot of the time we just breeze through them and we don't really pay attention and we just do what needs to be done. And I think that the way that we approach, those sexual harassment policies are not beneficial to what they actually entail. I think, a much better way to do it, to implement those, is to have, an open forum workshop where it's, all right, these are some of the things that count as sexual harassment. Have some role play, have some examples, there, and then give people the opportunity to ask questions, to be, oh, okay, if I do this, so then that counts as sexual harassment, because there's a lot of things that we actually don't know or aren't aware of and don't pay attention to. And we don't think it's sexual harassment. We think it was a joke. We think it was, oh, I just, I gave her a hug because, I've, felt bad or whatever. And there are a lot of those instances where it's part of the sexual harassment policy that if you do that, that's sexual harassment. And a lot of the time we associate sexual harassment as just being, the inappropriate touching, the super sexual comments, the more outward advances, when in reality, it's just don't say things to someone that makes them feel, like they are being sexualized, right? Don't touch someone in a way that could make them uncomfortable. And it's always something that I ask people before I, shake their hand, give them a hug. I always ask, is it okay if I give you a hug? Is it okay if I shake your hand when I meet new people? Because you don't know what their level of comfortability is. And so something to instill in not just workplace culture, but general culture is to really be respectful of other people's boundaries and saying, all right, I know that I'm okay with being hugged or being, my hand being shaken or, someone making this joke or comment towards me. But you have to ask yourself, or tell yourself, but I'm not that person. I don't know what they've been through. I don't know what they feel. I don't know what they think. So rather than me going in for that hug, maybe I ask, hey, is it okay if I give you a hug? Right. And that little step goes a very long way in making not just women feel respected, but people in general feeling respected of their space.
Yeah, Sophia, along those same lines, and just really quickly, I was wondering, there have been work relationships that I have been in, and there is a terminology that is used quite often. Many of us have had them in our lives. I know I have definitely had them in our lives, but it seems like it is mutually acceptable, and in some cases, it's even mutually acceptable by the other person's partner and everything. But there are folks that have a close bond that are in those work environments, and there is a term called the work wife and the work husband, and all in that space. So I was wondering how much of that is allowed in your mind and everything, because there is definitely some folks that I have had deep friendships with, and I've had friendships with all of the people involved, and we have jokingly used that term and everything, that is the work wife and all in that space. But how much of that is acceptable in your mindset?
Yeah, I think, it's always great to have close relationships with people you work with. I think it's great for camaraderie. And again, it comes down to that respect again, where it's all right, have they both, mutually, agreed on, how we're acting with each other? Do they have that communication with each other? And I think something always that I keep in the back of my head is if I see, a relationship that's kind of like that at work where, oh, that's the work wife, that's the work husband. I usually won't say anything unless, we're in conversation and they've already referred to themselves as that. And I think that's something, important there. But I think at the same time, it's use that at your own discretion. Obviously, if they're both married or both in committed relationships with different people, just be mindful of, the spaces that you're using that terminology in, the people you're using that around. Maybe don't use it around, their significant others, just, out of respect. But, I think that especially when we talk about, those types of policies in the workplace, I definitely am not advocating that there can be no touching of each other, no camaraderie, no, none of, that type of, banter back and forth, but just that we're being mindful of, am I, hurting another person? Is what I'm saying respectful? Is what I'm saying appropriate for the workplace? Is what, the method of, physical touch I'm doing, has this already been agreed upon before? Is this person okay if I give them a hug, if I shake their hand, if I, do this kind of thing with them? So yeah, really a lot of it is around just that mutual understanding. Conversation's always key. So if you're never sure with anyone, always ask them. I think everyone is happier to be asked, questions rather than people assuming and then there being a problem later.
Yeah, definitely. Lee said he never heard that term. I've definitely heard it there for a number of times and all in that
Yep.
space. So it's definitely a term that has been out there for a while. Definitely, if anybody's got any last minute thoughts or questions or things that they want to bring up, even of news related stuff, we can go there. And otherwise, I definitely wanted Sophia to tell about her organization and how she can be reached. And I would love to have her come back on. I know she's going to be on the online dinner party later, but I'd love to have her come back on some other shows, including this news show later as well. But definitely any ways that you can be reached and that you can share your ways that you are able to be out there and able to be accessed both in the podcast lane as well as with your organization.
I know Jacoby has a question. I'm seeing him like.
So interesting thing. I was watching. I don't know if you guys watched it. I mean, this is kind of topical, but it wraps right back around into the whole empowerment and working together as a struggle, and kind of, I guess, encompasses how we can all work together in a sense. So I was watching the Juneteenth celebration on Monday. I don't know if you guys got a chance to watch the one that CNN put on, a great one, which I was shocked at. They had, the musical acts and, the individuals out there talking. Phenomenal. They did a dedication to Tina Turner and everything else. But I did find me a new artist that I'm actually, I might get hooked on. I don't know if you've ever heard of Big Frida.
I have not, no, but I think might have seen the name somewhere though.
So Big Frida she's blowing up. And what is cool about it, and I think Sasha tried to...
Is that a pun, Jacoby? Big Frida's blowing up?
No, Big Frida, it's not really a pun. It's just a reference to how her music career is taking off big time. And I think Sasha tried to touch on it, but in a different manner, but I'm going to touch on it in a more positive manner on this one. So Big Frida is a transgender Black woman. And her music career is taking off. And the fact that she did a big time performance, and that was just, amazing on a Juneteenth celebration, and thinking about how Black women are mistreated, transgender women are mistreated, and the whole importance of the Juneteenth celebration and how that wrapped around to come back to the whole empowerment thing. I thought that was so cool, the empowerment and the representation, and how, young Black girls will see her, and also the performance that she put on. And even young women would see her, and young transgender women would see her and feel that power. So I guess to wrap it all back around, you should check out Big Frida. It's pretty cool.
Is she going to play in Australian Open chess the tennis tournament?
She might. You never know. I mean, Big Frida, she could perform there. They could ask her, and she'd be big time. Because I'm telling you, Big Frida was great.
How would you address when there is, say minorities competing for jobs, well-paying jobs, managerial jobs, and they are of different color? Let's see, white women, the Hispanic women, and Black women. And they're all competing for the same pie or a piece of pie. How would you use it? Would that be enforced competition between the same gender but different races?
I think that's something that is a very, interesting concept that a lot of us talk about in the empowerment space is, thinking about, women and how we are in the workplace, as less of a, all right, do I get a piece of the pie? Because that, insinuates that there's only one piece to go around, but there's only a limited amount. When really we can think about, us as really just, sharing, sharing the whole pie together. I think that, something that's very dangerous for women is a lot of the time, we are in competition with each other because there's not a lot of opportunity to begin with for career advancement, especially in leadership spaces. And we tend to get pitted against each other because people, make it sound like there's only this one position that you can take. That's it. It's, between, us four women, we have to, fight for it, when really it's about, addressing, all right, well, why is there only one position for these four women? Is there no other place for advancement? Is there no other, nothing else that they can go into? Is there no other, leadership opportunity there. And so I think that when we think about competition, really we have to, and this is something us as women do, is reframing our mindset as if any woman gets in the door, we're happy. If I don't get a job, that's great. That's okay. But if another woman gets it, I'm happy with that because someone else got the opportunity that, I would have gotten, but she's pushing, the entire gender forward by being able to be in that position. And I think that, a lot of it is on that support and going, okay, I might not be able to win at everything. I might not be able to succeed at everything. But if someone, in my same community does, then it's a win for me. Right. And it's
Hey,
readdressing that
Sophia,
mindset.
along those same lines, what do you say to those that are in the corporate world and they do that? Because you're in that corporate world, you're definitely in the nonprofit space, but it's also in the major corporations. They do that tick the box thing where they will find
Mm,
somebody that is able to go, in terms of Jacoby's example, they will find the Black woman, trans, handicapped woman. I can go down the list, and they tick off each one of those categories as that representation in that space. So I was wondering, how do you deal with that in your talking and in your talking points and everything? Because we do know that in the modern day corporations, there are organizations that will do that. They will find somebody that can tick off 6 or 7 different boxes in order to say that they met their so-called quota in all of those categories.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things there. With the first being, why is it a quota and why isn't it just, all right, I think that, after this person's interview, I think that this person would be great at this job. Obviously, inclusion is something that we have to be mindful of, right? We have to make sure that, we're not just hiring people from the same demographic. But, my view on the quota system is it's very broken because a lot of the time, as you were saying, organizations will say, all right, we know we need one person to get all these boxes for us. So we're just going to disregard everyone else and go for this one person. And then, if someone else applies who, let's say, is a minority, well, we don't need them because we already have the token minority at our organization. And I think that's where a lot of the problem lies is, we pay so much attention to that and then we disregard when people want to be included again. We're like, we have the token person, we don't need to include other voices. We met our, we met those standards there, we're fine. And so really a lot of it has to go into that organizational culture, that just general corporate culture of, you know, the more inclusive, the more diverse an organization, a company is, the better it performs. For the sake of, different ideas, different education levels, different upbringing, and just different perspectives altogether. And so it's going in with that headspace and reinforcing that headspace. And this is something that, coaches should be doing, leadership development coaches, corporate coaches, those coaches that are trying to do capacity building in organizations need to be pushing is, I don't care how many, how much your stock performed. I don't care, what your operation systems you have set up are. I don't care about that. I want to know, how inclusive are you? And are you open to hiring, more people that can really, up your inclusivity level, your diversity level, so that you can better perform, right? So that your stock can go up, so that your profits next quarter can go up. Because there are plenty of studies out there that show when you have diverse boards, when you have diverse organizations, staff, everything like that, your share price goes up, your profits go up, your just general um, the general ability to do what you do and to do it well goes up when you have different voices involved in the conversation there.
So
Uh,
isn't there a balancing act in between diversity and merit?
Yeah, I mean, if I think that's something that everyone struggles with. And when I say diversity, it doesn't mean that, it's people from different backgrounds that don't have merit, because there's plenty of, diversity that comes into the hiring pool that went to the same level of that has the same level of education, that has the same job experience or similar job experience or background. And, a lot of it also has to do with what's the potential of this person. So, for example, when I hire, something that I don't just look for is, do you have the qualifications? What are you studying in school? So I know that, we need to align that.
I also look at, all right, do I think you're going to stay at this organization? Do I think that you have opportunities to grow at this organization? Because one of the worst things you can do is to hire someone that already knows it all, that already is successful in every single way, that already, has all this knowledge, all this expertise, because they usually don't stay at organizations, because there's no room for advancement if they're, big fish, small pond. And so I always try to encourage and make sure that I bring people on where, they're perfectly qualified, but I know that they're bringing something different to the conversation. Maybe it's they're from a different part of the US. Maybe it's they are, a different race. And I know that, I want to make sure that when I'm doing programming for my nonprofit, I'm inclusive of every racial background to make sure that my programs are tailored for every racial background, because one size doesn't fit all. And so that's something that I always keep in the back of my mind is, what can this person bring to the table in terms of a different opinion? Because a lot of the time, I don't want people to just say, yeah, Sophie, that's great, we'll do that. A lot of the time, I would prefer if someone says, yeah, that's great, Sophie, but I think it should be done like this. Oh, that's great, Sophie, but what if we did this instead? I think that this would really just help us. I'd love to, figure that out. And so we need to embrace the challenge and be okay with that when we bring, people in that are different from us, that you're going to get, butting heads on some things. And that's part of organizational growth.
In bringing and talking about that diversity and how it can, I guess, stand on the positive again, how it can help. There are some, I guess we'll go into the ad world, for example, because Pepsi walked into it a couple of times. Having somebody instead of leading, having somebody in the room to help you decide if this is culturally insulting or appropriate, does that help?
Absolutely. And I know that we're pressed for time, so I'll leave off with this answer. And I think that the more people you have to call you out, the better, because you don't know, I don't know everything. And so there are moments where we've almost put out, let's say, a social media post, and someone says, hey, Sophie, I don't think that this wording is inclusive enough. And then me, who would never have noticed as a white woman, I go, oh my God, you're right. It's not inclusive enough. Okay, we need to go back to the drawing board and fix that. Even with accessibility of our social media designs. There are people that have given me stuff and the font's too small or the background is too bright, and where people with visual impairments can't read it. And so I have to say, hey, you know what? This is great. Most people can access this, but not everybody can. And we have to be cognizant that, we need to be tailoring content that it fits everybody. And so absolutely, we need to have people to challenge and people to make sure that, hey, this is culturally inclusive. That's not. Let's not do this. Let's do this instead. Because, we don't know if we're not part of that community.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You mentioned investment. Don't forget that at 1:00, Sasha will be having his investment show. So hopefully folks that are watching now can catch that, because that'll be at 1. So 1 until 2 today. And he will be talking about everything from poots to investments to maybe even some of the thoughts that he has that are not favorable of crypto and a number of other things. So he'll definitely be having conversations around a number of investment spaces, because that is one of his several shows. He does one on Ukraine, Russia, that is on Tuesday and Friday, the investment show on Wednesday at 1, and of course the chess show that he alluded to that airs on Saturday at 3:00, and all in that space. So definitely, hopefully folks will catch that show that'll be coming our way at the 1:00 hour. And Sophia, if you would, definitely, I said that earlier, but if you can tell folks how they can reach Claim Your Potential, and if you want to say the times that your podcast airs and where they can find that podcast, in case folks are interested in catching that and also getting in touch with your organization.
Absolutely. I just want to say thank you so much for having me on. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. And you can get in contact with me at claimyourpotential.org. All of our program information is on there, our vision, our mission, our team. So you can see, some of the people that, we bring on and that I work with. Our podcast is also on our website. We release new episodes every Tuesday at 6 a.m. Eastern Time. There is a episode that just came out on career exploration, and there's another one coming out next week on the power of community. We have lots of programs, so if you ever want to ask me questions about programs, get in contact with me on them. My email is on our website as well under the Contact Us page, and we are on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. So if you just search for Claim Your Potential, we'll show up. We have a big, beautiful purple and gold flowing hair woman as our logo. So again, thank you so much for having me on. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you all again.
Sounds great, and we definitely hope to have you back on World Edition in the not too distant future and all along those lines. And as Jacoby just did, and I appreciate that, that is the website. As a matter of fact, if you'll go to the Who Are We really quickly, you will see what I alluded to earlier, which is the diversity of her team and all of that. Because as I recall, I went there, and that was where I saw some of the team folks and all in that space. I think if you click down there, there you go. There you will see that it is a very diverse team of folks of different ethnicities and different styles of womanhood and all in that space. So definitely it is a very diverse team. So that is the staff and the consultants. I think that if you go further down, you might see some of the mentors as well. But there are definitely a diversity of folks that include, as I had mentioned earlier, some that were of Indian descent when Steve was here, and others as well. But yeah, that's what I was looking for, those folks that are the board of directors. And I think if you go even further down, there might be one or two of the mentors as well. But as you can see, it is definitely some folks that are there are they all in the DC area, or are they scattered internationally, because you are a national organization? Are most of those folks in the DC area?
So they're scattered across the U.S. You'll see they have their location on their profile. That's where they're based. So we work all across the U.S., and all of our staff is from different parts of the U.S. Right now, we are hiring here. We're based here. Our articles of incorporation are here. But as soon as we expand, then we'll definitely be hiring out to more countries.
Sounds great. And on that note, we're ready to get out of here, but I definitely wanted folks to see the diversity of your staff, since I had alluded to that at the beginning and all in that space. So we're getting ready to get on out of here with our globe that gets us in the beginning to start it and end it as well. So it's folks running around the world and all in that space. But we will be back again on tomorrow and on Friday. Can't remember if I've got a guest or not scheduled, but we'll definitely be talking about world events and all in that space. But definitely looking forward to the conversation, and hopefully, Sophia, you'll be making a return trip in the not too distant future. And I invited Kim, the co-founder, to come on, and hopefully she'll be on one of those as well, as she is definitely a woman business leader here in the Raleigh-Durham area and all in that space. So hopefully she will be making an appearance with you as well sometime in the not too distant future, so you don't have to feel that it is all men jumping on you and all in that space. So we would definitely try to get a little bit of a more balanced kind of view, because there are a couple of women that are involved in our space as well. So I'll definitely try to make sure that we have some of them on the next time that you appear.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a wonderful day.
Do the same.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.